It's culture. You have to put the right people in the right places. And that's hard at first. That takes a couple years, but your focus as a leader, that's where it is. Because if you don't set that stage or fix that, you have no chance of success.
And welcome back to the Good CARMA Podcast. My name is Rob Kramer. I'm the Executive Director for CARMA, the California Affiliated Risk Management Authorities. And this podcast, we're focused on risk management, police risk management issues. So in the past, we've had speakers talking about training with respect to police issues. Today, we have a guest that has been a police chief, as a city manager. We're going to talk about a little bit about training and his experience in that area, but also risk financing. How do you pay for these things? So risk management is made up of sort of two components. On the one side, there's, officer wellness, making sure officers are safe. Public wellness, making sure that we're protecting and serving and we're avoiding claims. But then there's the risk financing side. Well, how do you pay for all this training? How do you pay for the losses if you get them, liabilities, those types of things? So we're going to be talking about some of that. First, let's introduce my co-host, Rob Patton. So Rob, reintroduce yourself there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Patton. I'm the co-host of the Good CARMA Podcast. Super exciting. I know we're talking about risk management, and when you're in the business as a police officer, these are things you don't really have in-depth conversations about, right? It's usually at the upper levels. And so we as a team are excited to get this information out to the public because there's so much to learn. I'm retired law enforcement. I've been with the company here at CARMA for 3 years. I have learned so much in regards to this topic, and looking forward to what information Todd has to share with all of you. So thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, let's introduce our special guest, Todd Cusimano. So I've known Todd for a long time now. Todd was a police officer. Then he became the chief of police in a group of cities in the Bay Area that we'll have him talk about. And now he's the city manager. So he's done that whole spectrum, and he'll have a great background both on our police risk management issues, but also on the financing side and what worries him as a city manager. So Todd, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, just from your perspective?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's wild that we've become the old guys of the group. So, so 31 years in public service. I can't believe it's been 31. My journey is unique. I think if anything else, for my fellow cohorts, when they listen to this podcast, we don't have all the answers. I think the key is everyone's journey. Like 80% of what got us to where we are, it's confidence. That's the foundation. Take that 20% and keep learning and make ourselves better. And so if you take anything else from this podcast with me, it's the journey. Hopefully you pick something up and you can add it to your toolbox. But my journey really started, playing sports. Loved it. Loved being part of a team. My dad was a sergeant at Twin Cities Police Department. He formed the first SWAT team in Marin County. And I wanted to follow in his footsteps. He was my, childhood idol. And so when I had an opportunity, graduated college, I had an opportunity to follow him and work with him at Twin Cities Police Department. And so that's where I started my career back in 1995. And over the course of those years, 21 years in law enforcement, I had the opportunity not only to work with my idol, my dad, learn how to treat people, build my toolbox as a person. I got to basically, in a small organization, 34 sworn, we served a population of about 22,000. I got to do every position. I got to be an officer. I got to be a detective. I had the opportunity to be part of the special response team, promoted up to sergeant, captain, and ultimately chief. And so that was a fun experience. And during that time, becoming the chief, coming out of the late 2000s or the early 2000s, 2008 to 2010, the economy devastated departments and cities. And so for us, we had 34 sworn. It was my first year as chief, and we were down 7 positions. We had 7 frozen positions. And that's really where the journey began for me of building that toolbox, right? Your culture, people, trust. What are we going to do? What problem are we trying to solve? And at that time, it was the existence of policing for Corte Madera and Larkspur, those two cities, right? Twin Cities Police was in a really a state of disrepair. And so we'll get into that later, but what we did is we ended up consolidating. We added another city to our joint powers authority. So Twin Cities Police covered policing for the cities of Corte Madera and Larkspur. It was the only consolidated organization, two cities that were consolidated in 1982. We were the only ones in the state of California. It shows you how hard it is today to actually consolidate something. And what we did in 2011, we're like, do we want to keep going as we're going? Do we want to do a contract with the county, or do we want to add someone to our JPA? And ultimately, we added the town of San Anselmo, and we formed the Central Marin Police Authority. And with that, I was able to stay the chief. I was the chief for that authority for 5 years, and then I had the opportunity to move on and become the town manager in Corte Madera. And then I had the opportunity to move over to Mill Valley, where I am now as the city manager. And during that time as a city and town manager, I had the opportunity to be part of two more kind of consolidations. One was the Twin Cities Fire Authority, Corte Madera and Larkspur. And then we annexed our fire department in Mill Valley with Southern Marin Fire. And really, my journey isn't about consolidation, and I think we'll get into it. It's about building that toolbox. How do you develop culture, trust, in your people? Of what are we trying to do? Because all of this, it's not about a policy. It's not about necessarily a specific training. It's your people, it's your culture, it's trust. And so that's really what you're going to hear from me today, I think. But that journey of 31 years to get me here today, I think set me up for this conversation, and hopefully I have something to pass on to somebody else. And just one last piece, being part of the Bay Cities Risk Pool. That's what I am now. I'm a board member. I've been part of it actually on and off since 2007. As a sergeant, I was part of the Bay Cities Risk Pool with Rob as the executive director. And then now I'm a board alternate for CARMA. And so that path too of developing these relationships that I have with, the Robs and other city managers, finance directors, city attorneys, chiefs, we're at a place now of, our legacy is the information that we can pass on to others and setting them up for the future leadership for for multiple decision points, because we're really at that point now of a crossroads, like where I was with Twin Cities Police when I first became the chief. I think that's where we are in law enforcement. And I think some things have to change. And I think we have to start to develop those tools in our people to set the future leadership up for those decisions. So I'm excited to have this talk with you guys and share my journey.
Awesome. Well, to help our listeners a little bit, I just wanted to show two slides that explains what Todd was just talking about. So in a prior episode, we talked about CARMA and who CARMA represents. So this one slide here are the 6 different members of CARMA. 5 of them have police exposure. So MPA, CSJB, RMA, MBASIA, Plan JPA, and Bay Cities. So Todd, as he mentioned, is a board member on the Bay Cities Joint Powers Authority. You can see the number of members there. But then here, are the members in the Bay Cities JPA. So we're talking about all these public entities that have police departments. So the Central Marin Police Authority is the one Todd was mentioning that he was the police chief for. And so that's how these things work. They have these primary pools that are sharing risk at their level. And then when they have larger liability claims in particular, they're sharing risk at a higher level with everybody at the CARMA level. So I thought that would be helpful just to show everybody. So back to questions. So my first question, and then Rob, you can go next, is, Todd, I'm sure you think about things a little bit differently as a city manager than you did as a police chief. When you were a police chief, let's start there. What were the 3 biggest things you were always dealing with in your job as the chief of police, risk management perspective, that type?
Yeah, I think you're a teacher, and so for me, the 3, and I said it a little earlier, it was really your people. It's developing that culture and trust. It's not, you don't get that overnight. And so for me, I'm going to have a little fun. Everyone's different, but I've always used the football analogy with my staff. All right. So it's April and celebrating the NFL, it's draft month. So we'll talk about that. So really those were the three areas. And so it's developing your teams, number one. Right. And so do you have the right people in the right spots? And so I always focus first on my people. And so setting them up for success. And so that was your frontline supervisors, your corporals, your sergeants, and depending how big your organization is, potentially your lieutenants. Those are the three. That's the core. You have to have the right people in those spots, period. It doesn't matter how big your organization is. Those are the key spots. And so that's what I focused on. And I made sure I had the right leaders in place because they're the ones that are going to develop the strategies, the problem solvings, the early warning systems, all the things that we talk about. And I know you guys work on. That was number one for me, developing the team. And then it was getting everyone in the room. And so I'll use the example of the consolidation. So what we did, it was the first piece of really kind of building my philosophy as a leader. And it doesn't matter if you're a director, a chief, or a city manager, it's all the same. It was getting into the room and saying, listen, here's how we're set up, right? And it starts with the budget. Here's how the budget is set up, guys and gals. I'll just say we have a $40 million budget. Here's how it's broken down. 85% of that budget is salary benefits, right? It's not a surprise. Another 5 or 10 is overtime. And then you have equipment, right? And then you have off to the side, you have the secret fund, I'll call, and it's usually non-departmental, and it's the insurance fund. It's everything we're going to be talking about today. It's hidden. It's not actually in a police budget. It's over here, so no one sees it. So what we did is we brought it in, and we had this global conversation at a high level of like, here is the budget. Here it is, like opening up the curtain, having the big whiteboard and like 60 people behind you and walking them through the budget so they understand it completely and saying, look, workers' comp, liability, lawsuits, claims, it all comes from this account here. Here's the number. Here's how we compare with others. From an actuary, our size, here's what we should be paying. Here's what we are paying. And they can start to see that delta. We have work to do, right? Workers' comp and claims, it's directly tied to morale. And I believe that today. I always have. It is. And so you tell that story. And so long story short, you have this big picture conversation with the team so they understand it. They know what we're talking about. And then you're like, okay, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Whatever it is, right? And then you develop your team from that meeting. So everyone, as you start to go and make big picture decisions, as you problem solve, people can see the dominoes. So culture. So you start with your frontline supervisors, your culture. Do you have the right people in the right spots? You could have a 30-year sergeant that's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not listening to the new leader. I'm doing it my way and I'm on day shift. I'm senior. I'm going to take my spot. This is where I am, right? And then you have the new sergeant that's on graveyard, that's ready to go and learn new things and get the team going. It's culture. You have to put the right people in the right places. And that's hard at first. That takes a couple years, but your focus as a leader, that's where it is. Because if you don't set that stage or fix that, you have no chance of success. That's the dirty little secret. So your first domino is educating everyone and letting them see what the plan is, where you're going, who you are as a leader, what the expectations are, and how you're going to support them. And then you go forward. They're going to judge you every day from your words. You're held accountable as a leader of what you did, but they're also understanding where you're trying to go as an organization, and you're putting the right people in the right places to move it. As a leader, it's not for you to come from a risk pool meeting or some training and go, I'm going to solve the problem top down. We're doing this. The core group of first line supervisors, that's the most important position in any organization, sworn or non-sworn. They're the ones that are going to control morale, move the organization. So you have to have the right people in place and set them up for success. And so it's people, it's culture, and then trust is developed over time. It's from that first meeting that they get to meet you as a new leader, and every day after, right? They're judging you, you're judging them, and you have to work inside out. So it's your organization internally, inside out, and then culture. Trust is developed, with your community, with your people. So, that's just number one, so those are the three areas that I think about. And those are the steps, and the focus is ultimately people. And it starts with your supervisors. You got to have the right people.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting to me, I'm going to do a follow-up when you were talking about explaining the budget to your staff when you were the chief of police. I think that's amazing. I think that's the exception. I honestly think one of the issues we're having in trying to get this CARMA training out there, people don't understand the risk financing side and what that's all about. And I think most chiefs maybe don't explain, look, we have this very limited portion of our budget that's for loss costs and equipment and these other things, because you're right, 85, 90% is benefits and wages, right? Everybody knows where that goes. But I don't think that's explained enough. So people don't quite understand the connection that if we have more losses and more loss costs and those things go up, that there's less for new vehicles, there's less for raises, there's less for whatever. So I think that's amazing. Do you think that's because you had the opportunity to sit on the Bay Cities board that you were brought that perspective? Why do you think that other chiefs may not bring that same perspective?
Yeah, so I had a uniqueness. So for me, again, when I talked about, and still today, Central Marin Police Authority is one of the only consolidated police departments in the state of California. That's still, there's only a handful if there are. And I think for me, it gave me the opportunity as a chief to serve 3 communities. I have 3 city managers. I had 3 city councils. Think about that as a new chief. So you're learning on the fly different cultures, different traditions, all those things. And so I had a city manager, Gene Bonander. Gene Bonander, as a sergeant, saw something in me. We were doing contract negotiations at the time, and it was really contentious. And in there, I came in like I do anything else. Let's solve a problem. It's not emotional. Let's solve a problem. Help me understand. Like, I want to seek to understand your side so I can, and I want you to understand mine, and let's problem solve. And so Jean and I worked through that. And after, she's like, hey, I see something in you. I want to teach you about the budget. I want to teach you about risk management. And she was one of the, initial city managers that helped form Bay Cities back in the day. And so she taught me the budget, and she taught me the budget holistically: unfunded liabilities, risk management, all the things from a city manager's perspective. And then she brought me in to Bay Cities and allowed me to be part of some of the subcommittees on risk management on the law enforcement side. And I got to meet a whole nother set of city managers within Bay Cities since 2007. I've been part of this since 2007. And so that helped me of being, I ran basically my own little city as a chief, right? I had 3 city managers, but they delegated to me because they had that trust to run my organization kind of like a city. I understood the budget, I put it together. And so I had a skill set that most chiefs never get to have. I actually was building a skill set to be a city manager and didn't even realize it, right? So she taught me that, in Bay Cities carried that over into a more holistic approach of thinking about, okay, what are the roles of my organization, my city, my county relationships, and then my relationship with Bay Cities? Well, Bay Cities, I look at it as, and we'll talk about it, I think, in a little bit, but at a high level, Bay Cities has the numbers. Hey, here's how you're performing, Mill Valley or Central Marin Police, but here's how you're performing as a JPA, and here's how you're performing statewide compared to your cohorts and other JPAs, right? Here's the risk. Here's where people are getting hurt. Here's where people are getting sued. And then turning into, okay, then what are we going to do about it, right? Training, equipment, decision-making, all the things that you're working on now, right? That we're working on through CARMA. And so then carrying that information over to managers, to council members, and saying, hey, here's what Bay Cities is. We're not insured. We don't have commercial insurance. We're self-insured. This is what self-insurance means. It's our money. And when our money goes into the middle with our 22 cohort agencies in Bay Cities, we hold each other accountable, right? Because if one of us isn't taking the best practices, we have nothing. What are we doing? It's our money, And so city councils are like, well, how do we compare to others? And then also, let's make sure we're doing everything we should, but let's make sure we hold everyone else accountable. It's peer pressure. And something that's so shocking to me, Robs, are the lack of, we have the wrong people sometimes on our boards. If you're on a board, you should have decision-making authority for your organization. And when you're going to make a change on issues that we're all having as a board, a best practices approach, we should be able to make it. And you have board members, sometimes you have an HR director, you have a finance director, which may make sense for that city, but they're not going to go to a chief of police and say, hey, we need to make we need to first educate you on something that maybe you're not aware of. And then we need to get the right people in the room. Our first line supervisors are people that are going to problem solve this and get them in the room with our leadership, our Robs and others, and go problem solve the issue, right? That's the game. That's what we're talking about here. And I think everybody's different. So that's the big piece for me, my frustration, but also hopefully it's a gift of like, hey, wait, how did you do that? And how do I get that information? And I know, Rob, you did it. I know that our executive director, Jace, is doing it now. We call it the roadshow. You're going to the city councils and going, hey, here's what Bay Cities is. Here's what it means. Here's your role on it. Here's your responsibility. Oh, by the way, here's what we're seeing as trends moving forward. And then, as a police chief, you would look at workers' comp claims and you would say, okay, ergonomics, we're mental health, physical health, right? We're looking body, spirit, mind, all those things. As a city manager, you're like trees. Hey, how are we getting sued? Where are all of our risks? Okay. And you share that with the council, and then you develop a capital improvement plan for 5 years ago, and let's go attack these risks. And a council appreciates that because now they can make policy changes, right? Decisions. It's the same thing as board members. Our role is to make policy decisions, and you need the right people in the room to move that policy. And I think sometimes that's the vulnerability of our risk pools, and so.
Yeah, that's great. I wish there was more of those relationships you just talked about with you and Gene Bonander. It seems like there's less of that. Sometimes the police departments operate separately than the city, and they don't have that same collaboration that you had. And I wish there was a way that we could help train in that area. And I think we'll figure that out. How do we get them to understand it the way that you do? Because that's a whole different perspective when you're thinking about things the way you are. But before we leave police, Rob, how about some other police questions? Let's talk to Todd about when he was police chief.
Well, I just have one off the cuff. Just that listening to you, Todd, you have a super unique and modern approach to policing, and I like it because oftentimes we're kind of not in that mindset, and I only just speaking out of experience in my current position, when we travel around and do presentations to executive staff, command staff members, and they're really unfamiliar with the risk pool structure in general, but your experience has set you up for something really unique. And I'm already visualizing, maybe a training opportunity, like a webinar where you're just basically sharing information that you're sharing with us, with other police heads within CARMA. So that's for another conversation, but I really like your modern approach. And so from your perspective, what do most people misunderstand about modern policing?
Yeah, I think it's, they forget that we're human beings. We have the humanistic approach, right? I think when you're thinking about juries or just residents in general, they think every police officer is created equal. Every department is created equal. They look at us as robots, not people. They think we have all the answers. They think we have a lot of discretion and time to make decisions when we don't. And I think that's the trust conversation, right? You don't gain trust overnight. You gain it over time. And that's where we make a lot of mistakes in telling our story, right? They need to understand that I love the social media now. I see the young officers coming in using social media, bringing that personal touch, humor to themselves, and humility and having fun and like building those relationships. And so I think juries, they totally misunderstand what we go through. I mean, think about it. We do a really good job of trying to get people ready, but they come into an organization and they have to be generalists, especially in a lot of organizations that have a population of 50,000 or less. You have to do everything. And so we have a 22-year-old that comes onto the job, maybe has had 2 relationships in their life. Their interpersonal skills may be lacking because they rely on text messages and their cell phones. And then they get a disturbance call of a married couple married for 30 years and they're having a problem and they need you to, it's not domestic violence. It's just they're having problems and you got to mediate it. Well, did we set that 22-year-old up for success to make a split-second decision and they're on video? Then they got to work their way through a problem, right? It's intimidating. It's scary for our officers now of, the liabilities that are against them, the punitive damages. There's a lot of misunderstandings within them, within that whole line. And so there's a misunderstanding and lack of trust for new officers really quickly, of just afraid to do their job. And again, it just goes back to policing is it's human. It's the human element. The human element is not perfect. As a matter of fact, you're going to make mistakes probably on every call. You could be better on every call for service, right? And I think that's a really important point when someone's judging you or, thinking about that. You have to tell that story. And so I think that's my role. That's my role as a city manager. That's my role as a police chief, right? You have an audience. And so every time you have to tell your story. And I think, you can't just be a victim. You have to bring that story to the community. And so I think you have the best opportunities when there's mistakes made and you get out, and it's happened to me a handful of times. People came out in droves and were ready to just come at us, and you just get in front of it. It's not a press release. It's not a social media. You just get in front of everybody, and you have an audience. And my first audience is my people. My second audience are the residents, and then my city council. And I tell the story, and you just own it. Hey, look. It's the human element. We're never going to be perfect, but we have good intentions. We didn't put on our boots this morning to violate someone's civil rights. No crimes were committed. But yeah, here's what happened. Here's the facts. Here's where we could have been better. Here's where some mistakes were made. Own it. Don't be afraid not to. Own it. And then show some humility and then go, and this as the chief and our team, this is what we're going to do to make sure it never happens again. That's the training. That's the element, right? And you hope you live another day as a supervisor doing it. But I can tell you, in the 5 to 7 times I was standing tall in front of the community, it took the wind out of everyone's sails. They had a sigh. They still made their comments, but that trust started to build because they knew you were going to own it, and your people knew you had their back. You were in the front. You're not going to throw anyone on the bus. Hey, if someone commits a crime, that's on you. Right? You've lost the ability. You're on your own. But aside from that, we got you, and I think that trust is important, but that story with the community, you have to continue to tell your story. So your officers add that humanistic approach to policing. You're getting out on you're bringing the 70s traditional style of policing back to your city. You're getting out of your cars. You're meeting people. You're going to the neighborhood, barbecues. You're out there. You're having fun. Every traffic stop. Hey, you know what? It's not about statistics. That's our biggest problem. We reward statistics. It's not. Have a good contact. Use those traffic stops as good contacts, right? People see you stop somebody. You give them education. You can maybe cite them. Have a good contact. People see you out there. It's all good. Everything is an opportunity. Everything is a training moment. But when you put the uniform on, it's game time, and you gotta start to build the trust every day. Right. And so I think that's the biggest misnomer. They think we're robots. They think we have all the answers. They think we're well trained. They think we have time, to make, we're all created equal. Like if one makes a mistake, from 3,000 miles away, we're doing the same thing here. Right. We have the same bad intentions. And so I think it's up to us to tell our story and hold each other accountable for that story.
That is amazing to me. You should be a consultant instead of a city manager. Just sending that message out to the police departments, because that resonates so much with me and what we're trying to accomplish here. Rob, go ahead. I know you probably have some others.
Yeah, no, you're just nailing it right now. I mean, ego in law enforcement. I mean, come on. I mean, just even outside of law enforcement, that's the number one killer in business and life, right? So you're talking a lot about humility, and that goes hand in hand with trust, right? So, really good information. So, next question is from a risk management perspective. If you could redesign policing from scratch today, what would you keep and what would you change?
Well, I love it. You said it there, ego. So right now, my cohorts are like Todd Cusimano. Let's see, where is he from? How big? What's his path? And where, to size me up in the first 15 seconds. And so for me, I'm going to equate it back to sports, because that's what got me here. That's my 80%. And so it's developing your team. And so look, it's game time. When we step out on that, we put our uniforms on, we get dressed, we're coming out. It's game time. We're playing to win. And so you could have your ego all you want, but I'm checking it. I'm part of a team. It's my team, and we're going to go do it. We're going to dominate. Everything we do, we're going to be perfect. And, and being perfect is knowing you're not perfect, right? And so you got to have the right temperament, the right traits. You got to have the right people in the right places. And so consolidation, and we all are doing it right now in our own ways. But if you have an organization of less than a 50,000 population, and I use population because that's kind of how we start to set up how many sergeants and investigators and, the structure. You really don't have a fighting chance of success in the future. You're vulnerable. You have so many vulnerabilities because your people are generalists and they don't have the ability to have the tools and traits and support that they need to be truly, truly successful. So if we're in a situation, you're like, let's go develop our ultimate kind of situation. It's kind of how we got to the consolidations. I'm just going to use Marin County as an example. My perfect situation, you have a population of 250,000 people. You have a county policing side of sheriffs that support 50,000 population, San Rafael's 50, Novato's 50, and then all the other jurisdictions, you have 11 other cities that are the remaining 100,000 population. Think about that for a second. Most of them are 3 to 16,000 population. You have 4 dispatch centers in the county. So in my perfect world, first thinking, I'm going to think as a city manager for a second. I'm just going to start with money. My opportunity, I need to provide the ultimate service to my community. You should have 1 centralized dispatch center, right? Not 4. Think about the savings alone to the Marin County residents, taxpayers, of having 1 county dispatch center. Second, think about the training then that you're able to offer those dispatchers, right? So you add the resources, you have additional people, you have cost savings and training. You have a truly professional dispatch center. Then you take the rest of the organizations, and instead of having, a sheriff, which we need, but then you have 7, 8 chiefs in Marin County, you only need 1. And then you move the resources down. How many captains do you need? How many lieutenants? How many sergeants? How many officers, right? You have a lot of cost savings there, but you also put people in the right places. Then you start internally with your frontline supervisors, your team, your culture, the right people in the right spots. Because right now, I'm not trying to solve any problems, I'm trying to put the right people in the right spots. Specialization. So first, you got your core, your patrol team. They're handling your quality of life, really the non-high risk issues, right? You're doing the basics of noise complaints, neighborhood disputes. You're doing the everyday 90% of what officers do. That's the team, right? And they're led by their supervisors. You got to have a professional standards or support services team. That's key because that's the team that we're talking about that needs to be attached to our risk pools. They're our trainers. They're the ones that are going to put this together. What are we trying to do, right? So you got them, your professional investigators, your investigative team. Then you have your special response team unit, right? You're actually specializing units into those high-risk situations. So that would be the SRT team. And so you have dispatch, you got your support services with training, investigations, your patrol team that every day front face, everyone sees them. There are problem solvers, mental health, homelessness, all that good stuff. And then you have your high-risk team. And you develop your teams. Right. And so within it now, we're like, okay, what are we trying to solve? And so you're taking your training, your professional standards team. And so as a chief, as a city manager on my boards, I'm like, okay, hey, Rob's, where are we getting hurt? What are the issues? Like, show me where the vulnerabilities are within the risk pool, right? That's for me. I'm not sharing that with my team. Tell me as a policy, as an operational leader, what do I need to know? Give me the education. I am seeking to understand, right? So it's the Todd Cusimano philosophy of like, hey, here's how you should think about your whole budget and how you should tell the story to your team. For you guys on Karma, right? We're saying, hey, here's how we're getting hurt. Here's how we're getting sued. Here's like some tools in the toolbox. You're educating your leadership. And then the leadership is like, okay, I got it. I'm bringing in my professional standards team. They're coming in. Let's form a side team. They're getting with Rob Patton, and you guys are doing the work. Hey, here are the 8 areas we're working on. Let's go solve it, right? Let's build our model of how we bring that back to the organization. And when you bring it back, it's kind of the SLI with Post, right? Peace Officer Standards and Training focused years ago, and I think it was right, on forming the Supervisory Leadership Institute for supervisors, right? They understood frontline supervisors are the key. So if you focus on anything else with a training program, we're taking it back now. And now it's not Karma, Bay Cities, Todd Cusimano telling someone what to do, right? Who are they to tell us what to do? It's the professional standards team. They're bringing it back to their organizations, and we're developing trainings to our frontline supervisors, our coaches, our mentors. All right. We're giving them the tools in the toolbox that they need to do their job. And then now take it to like this year, I'm coaching my fourth grader in basketball, baseball. That training program for fourth graders is the same training program for those frontline supervisors. You're going in and you're like, look, here's what we're doing. Here's why this is important. And we're training now, right? I'm the coach. Today, I'm the sergeant. I'm thinking about my coaching game plan for my fourth graders. What are we going to do today? Well, I got my coaching plan for today from my professional standards unit. Let's go. And you show them, right? Hey, today we're going to learn this. You teach them. Right? And then you show them. You're out in the field and you show them. And then you have them show you that they understand it. And you practice it. You train it. And when it's time to go game time, we're going game time, right? And at the end, it's that piece of understanding. You're never going to be perfect. It's okay. So as a chief of police, as a lieutenant, as a captain, as a sergeant, you're like, it's okay to make mistakes. I want you to try new things. I want you to fall on your face. Heck, I want to hire people that have made mistakes. I want you to have experience. What have you learned from your mistakes? Let's learn from each other. We may learn on these training programs when we're doing things. Oh my God, I never thought about that. And you're developing that culture, the trust to be okay. Like your officers have to know that if they try something and they make a mistake, they're not going to get their head taken off. So when we have all this AI technology and we're like all the early warning systems of like how to catch or how to find, issues with personnel to prevent risk, that does not help culture and that does not build trust. Your frontline supervisors are the ones that know everything. If they have the trust and the ability and they're doing all the right things, they're your early warning system. If someone is struggling, they have stuff going on in their personal life. We're all human. Like we have things, you got to step back and help. So back to what your original question, you're developing culture and trust, your people, and it starts in that order of operation. And then you take it one step further, and I'll stop, but it goes back to this of, I think as this chief of police, you come in now and you're like, hey, MOUs, like, right, we now have the right staffing, right? We've recruited the right people. We formed this beautiful organization. Now we got to keep it. We have to retain it. Well, retaining them is everything we just talked about, but it's also, you got to take care of them. They got to understand they have the salary and benefits, that they're competitive, and you have to have the tools in the toolbox to do it. So as a chief of police, what I did with my 3 managers, think about 3 managers for a second. I had 3, so I don't feel sorry for other chiefs. We started first with Peace Officer Standards and Training has that course of new, the city manager, police chief kind of relationship. And it's a 1-week course. And we went to that. And I had 3 managers that went. Everyone felt sorry for me. It was pretty fun. But I developed my relationship with the 3 managers. Interpersonal relationships are everything. You got to trust each other. You got to understand each other. You got to check your ego and know your role. And so I knew my role, right? My role was my role as a police chief. So that was number 1. Number 2 then was to say, hey, managers, Gene Bonaner gave me the toolbox years ago. I understand the budget, so let me explain it to you. Never come to me. It's not helpful to say, hey, we have to cut 10% from the budget. So you're in a staff meeting and the manager goes, cut 10% across the board. Every department is cut. Give me scenarios on 5, 10, and 15% cuts. Give them to me. Well, guess what? In bad times, you never get those positions back, right? That was my story back in Twin Cities. You should never do that. If you do that as a city manager and have to as a police chief, you failed epically. Like, you should never be in that situation. So as a chief, I was like, hey, managers, I understand 85% of my budget is salary benefits. I know it. Here it is. Here's, if you cut me like that, here's what's going to happen. My overtime budget's going to triple. Your budget is not going to have any savings. And then you're going to have a morale issue because my people are worn out. Risks are going to go through the roof because you have tired officers, you have frustrated officers, you have low morale within my agency. You're going to start to get workers' comp claims. You're going to start to, and I was able to show them charts of when you went down and had frozen positions. You could see it and you could start to do the charts and go, look, here's the line. If I go down X amount of positions, here's what happens. If you go down more, here's what you could show them the trends. And they're like, oh my gosh. And then what I would do is go, look, I understand that you have revenues to expenditures and you have all your needs as city managers. I get it. But within the program, you have 3% rate of increases over, revenues to expenditures. And I go, I understand that now you're going into non-departmental. This is the secret fund. And I will go over to the side and I'm like, hey, for us, our budget, which was the police budget, was about $10 million. There was an additional $1 million outside of the premiums that we paid in workers' comp and claims that we were paying at the time, $1 million annually that I only cared about my overtime budget as a chief. That's what most chiefs all care about. But they don't care about the other side. I'm like, hey, I understand it. And here's how we're getting hurt. Here's how we're getting sued. Here's my plan. We should be only paying $250,000 annually. So if I can take that delta of $750 over the next couple of years and I can lower it, how much are you willing to give back to me where I can then invest in my people and tell the story of like, hey, if we do our part right, I can give you 3%. I can get you this. I can, if I want you to be well-trained and educated, I'll pay you for your education. I'll give you incentive pay for your trainings and your education, right? It's things that councils support and understand, and managers, I could speak their language. And they said, yes, if you can do the following, here's your bucket. Thank you. And I went back to the team now. I had what I needed. And so I grabbed the leadership and I said, hey, look, here's our issue. Here's where we're at. Here's the plan. Let's do it together. I taught them the model. And then I'm like, let's problem solve now. What do we do? And I wasn't there for solutions. I'm like, what do we do? What does yes look like? What keeps people here and excited to be in the top 3 in the county or whatever we're shooting for? And we did it together. And so since that time, going all the way back to 2011, I've never brought in an outside negotiator to negotiate with any of my labor groups, police, fire, the 3 consolidations. I've never brought in legal counsel or a rep. I did it myself. And I did it with them together because I showed them it. They believed in what they saw. We had the plan. And then when we had that savings and that peer pressure of like, hey, people are going to get hurt, but let's not take advantage of the system. It's our money. It's not some secret bucket, right? When they understood that and they could reinvest in themselves, they got it. And it's been a really successful relationship. It's really rewarding for me as we go in. And so now they know it. So, in Mill Valley, even, I've only been there 3 years. We're about to go into negotiations next year. And, they know the dialogue, the conversation, the right way to approach it. And they're already problem solving solutions for the next round. And so it's people, it's culture, and it's trust. And it's not difficult. I just think the chiefs and managers need to be educated and have the right information. And then we need to get the right people in the room. The frontline supervisors are trainers who know better than all of us. They see it in real time, and you got to give them that trust and accountability to go problem solve solutions for us. And so if it's us going to chiefs and lecturing them, it just doesn't work, right? Our egos are we finally got into a seat, and we don't want to give it up. We don't want to be told what to do, and so it's relationship building, it's interpersonal relationships. It kind of starts with the podcast that what you're doing now. I think this is great, this series, because you're personalizing it, and you're like, and someone might take one thing that we talked about in an hour, and that's great. Then take it to the 80% of who you are and add another tool in your toolbox, and you're going to be better for it. I think the smaller organizations, my message, and I'm one of them, Mill Valley Police, it's like, get your house in order, inside out. focus on your people, your supervisors, and then build out. And then, you can't have specialized units. So then you have to, hey, can we have maybe 2 officers on a special response team for the county? Hey, that's, out of 20 sworn officers, I have 5% that have that specialized training that they could take back to my people. Same thing with investigations. Same thing. You have to just be creative, but get your house in order, because when it's time to have that opportunity to maybe consolidate or join someone else, because ultimately that's where we're going to have to go in policing in these smaller organizations, you're ready to go. And you have that respect amongst your cohorts, knowing that you have your house in order, right? You need to be the best. And so, that's the recruitment retention. That's what we're selling here in a small organization. Hey, you want to be part of the team? I'm going to give you the tools, the building, the support, and the team to go do what you want to do. Let's go have fun, but let's take care of business when it's time to take care of business. And so it's the team coaching mentality, and having fun doing it.
I love that.
That's where it's resonating with me. I mean, working for, people of your mindset, you thrive in that. I'm biased. I'm a sports guy too. And so I have that background where you have leaders like yourself that empower people to realize their potential, to understand that, I am going to make a mistake, but guess what? The boss or the coach or the mentor, they have my back and they're going to support me and they're going to get me through that. And so that's just going to only empower me more and make my decision making, at a higher level. You talk about, you're always peppering professionalism, dominate, win throughout this whole interview. And it's just that goes hand in hand with sports. But, the game of policing is not just a game. This is one of the most dangerous jobs in America. And so professionalism always has to be at the forefront with policing. And oftentimes that doesn't happen for the very reasons that you're kind of pointing out. So, man, this is, you're getting me all fired up, man. I'm going to have to start. I have one final question, Rob, and then we can transition. But Todd, you spent decades in law enforcement. But what made you realize you wanted to move from police chief to city manager?
Yeah, so I always just wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to work with my dad. I got to for 7 years. It was like the best 7 years of my life. I got promoted to sergeant, and he's like, I'm out. He's starting to promote. So he retired. Sergeant was the best job in law enforcement. It was my most favorite. I was the best at it. I don't care who's in the room. Confidence is everything, your ego. But that was my best professionally version of me. It just hit all the things I feel good about and who I am as a person. You're the coach, mentor, you're leading your team, you're doing your thing, day to day, you're out front in the community, all the things you talked about, professionalism. It was the best position. From that point on, of every position I've taken since, it was just like, if not me, who? And I've always had a good support system. I was homegrown. And so people, lucky for me, I did the right things early on. We all get our perception and our reputation. And I think I had a good one. And people always saw those traits and they're like, hey, we want you to do this. Will you try it? And so I never, in any of my positions to date, I've never just submitted an application for a promotion past sergeant. That wasn't where I was recruited by the leadership above me of saying, we want you to do this. We want to see if you're ready. We want you to try. And part of the deal and how I got it was because I didn't want it. I just wanted to be part of the team. I'm all in, put me in, coach. Well, we need you. Okay, I'll try it, but let's see. And so, I got police chief that way. And then I had an opportunity again. I had 3 city managers. 2 of my managers were retiring at the same time, my 5th year as police chief. And we had a lot of success together. We passed a big bond measure. We built a new state-of-the-art facility. We consolidated. We had all this success in a 2 or 3 year period. Part of that, the 3 cities combined in that consolidation actually had more police officers on the streets. The response times improved, and they saved combined $2 million annually amongst the 3 cities with that. It was a really remarkable time of success. And for me, I built my team. It was personal because I was homegrown. I had this personal commitment to Corte Madera, Larkspur, and San Anselmo. My dad grew up in Corte Madera. My dad worked for Twin Cities. It was never going to be better for me. And I built my team behind me, and I felt like I was going to start to lose the leadership behind me, and they were going to go somewhere else, which is also good for legacy, right? Your leaders get promoted in other cities. That's on you. That's your legacy, and that's a good thing. But it was time for a next person up. And so I stepped aside. I was recruited to try as town manager in Corte Madera, my council at the time, who had a lot of success together with what I just talked about. They said, and it was interesting. The council and in the state of California at this time, they're like, well, police chiefs can't be city managers. One, maybe because none of them want to, but they're like, well, a police chief can't be a city manager. But my council's like, you're a leader. We want you to take all your leadership things, everything you do with the police department, we want you to do with our organization, from the budget to people to culture to trust. Go do you. Bring it over we think it carries over, and like, hey, you're going to be new, but you're going to learn on the job with us, and we trust you. And when you make a mistake, own it and just move forward. And so that's what I did. I went over, and then my leadership team, my legacy, which I'm really proud of, they promoted within. They promoted my captain to chief, lieutenant to captain, and everyone moved up. And it was really just a special time for me. In Corte Madera, I took kind of this conversation we're having in police of how I handled Central Marin Police, and I tried some new things. So I didn't know planning and building. I had no idea. So what I did is I moved my office down behind the front desk of planning and building. And I sat there for 8 months and I listened to the conversations. I just listened. The frustration maybe of the process for a resident, the frustration of maybe on the other side for my staff. And after those meetings and hearing what I heard, I would talk to my staff about things. I would walk out the door with a resident or an architect or a contractor, and I just ask questions. Seek to understand, everyone. Check your ego. You don't know everything. Seek to understand. And I spent 8 months trying to understand that department. I already understood police and fire. The public works team, I understood them too. They're part of the public safety tree. But what I did there is I just jumped in the car on the storms, put my rain suit on. Let's go. Show me where it floods. Show me the high risk areas. Show me what you see every day. I'm here with you. Let's go. And you built that trust, that respect. We have a water treatment plant. I have no idea about that. I spent my time with the team. Show me what you do. Help me understand so I can help you, right? So you seek to understand. And once you have that model and I understood it, then I knew I had 200 employees. I can change culture overnight. I put the right people in the right spots. I supported them and we moved forward. And so I took the same philosophy in policing and it absolutely translates to cities and city government. And I was very successful in Corte Madera. We were smaller, so I was able to do it. And then honestly, I felt like I hit my threshold of success. Developed my team over 6 years in Corte Madera, and it was the same thing. It's time to move on. It'll never be better than this moment. And I think my team felt betrayed when I was leaving. But for me, I'm like, it's your time. It's time to step up as a leader. Go do it. But I wanted to stay in Marin County. I had my relationships, and I'm like, let's go to a city that I've never worked for, but has a lot of resources, and taking kind of my model that I've built at the time over 28-ish years, and let's carry it over into a place that has resources, a community that is very educated, very front-facing, very high touch, but also supportive, and volunteerism is high, and take that model with resources and see where if I can develop a 10 to 15 year strategy with infrastructure, people, and just the philosophy of like moving forward. And that's really what I did. I moved over. My team was able to promote up to town manager and beneath. And so again, another legacy setting thing that was really special to me. And then in Mill Valley, I've been there 3 years, now 31 years in public service. I could retire tomorrow. I could stay 3 years. And so for me, developing the team. And so right now, here's another little dirty secret. I think coming out of COVID, everyone, COVID. Well, or the economic downturn or recruitment retention, it's number one. We have problems. That's an excuse. Every issue we're faced with is an opportunity. So those of us that can forecast and see it can take advantage of it and use it to our advantage. And so when you think about retention, I have an organization of 200 people. There's 38 people within that organization that I must have. They're my core group. They're my leaders. They're the ones that problem solve everything, that help tell me what I need to know, who take my message and pass it down, that vertical, horizontal communication, that trust, the culture. They're the ones. I have to have them. So I put them, after 3 years, I knew who they are. I pay them the way they should be paid. I put them in the positions to give them the authority they need. I support them, and they run the organization. If I left tomorrow, depending on personality, 5 of those 38 could take over my job tomorrow and not miss a beat. That's just the way it is. And why is it? The other piece is city managers, anything else, you got to be willing to take risk. You have to make decisions, and you have to have the infrastructure in place to recognize when your decision maybe wasn't the best, pivot and move to where you need to go. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and support your people. You can never throw your people under the bus. It's on you. So if someone's struggling, that's where you lose sleep at night. Look in the mirror, fix it, set them up for success. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you do everything you're supposed to, you got to move on. You got to make change. That's on you. And so that's the dirty secret. That's the plan. That's what we all do. And so, city managers, police chiefs, directors, it's all the same at different scales. And people are smart. If you're not walking the walk and talking the talk as a leader, you don't have a chance. If you don't have their respect, you don't have a chance. If you're going to share services or consolidate or try to train together and they don't have that mutual respect with each other, you don't have a chance. Interpersonal relationships and trust are everything. So everything we do, we say, it's on us, and I could stand on here now and talk for another hour of all my mistakes I made. I made 3 really bad mistakes yesterday, bad ones, but I'm going to learn from them and I won't make them again. And my people know that I made them and I owned them and we're going to fix it, right? So it's every day. You're learning, you're seeking to understand, you're then problem solving the issues, and then you're moving forward, as you go, but you're pivoting because you're always going to make mistakes, right? That didn't work. Let's try something else. That's what your team wants. They want to be part of the discussion. They want to go attack it. And I think that's the core. Quit making excuses. I don't want to hear people talk about recruitment retention. I've been fully staffed for 2 years. Like, what are we talking about? So that's it. Instead of preaching and saying we know everything, I think it's just, for me, I feel the last piece, and I know I'm going off course, but 31 years, and I think I respect the two of you because of your experience and how we all got there. Really, we got there together. From a law enforcement standpoint, Rob, I have nothing on you, right? I mean, you have seen it, been there, done it. But we have a mutual respect for each other, and we come together to say, hey, we have to protect this industry. We have to protect our people, and how are we going to do that? There's tough decisions to be made. And our toughest issue right now is even opening the door with the right people to have the right discussion, to honestly look in the mirror, to identify the changes we need to make and move forward. We can't even do that, And so, that's where we are. And so I hope, if anything else, we can, and you guys have started it, that we can add some momentum over the next couple of years and really open those doors and getting the right people in the room and just supporting each other, moving forward.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue into the last thing we're going to talk about. So now that you're a city manager at a city that has public safety, police and fire as part of what you're managing, talk a little bit, help our listeners understand what it's like to manage the whole part of it, starting with maybe like, where does the money even come from? So, all public entities are based on tax dollars, right? You have a limited amount of tax dollars that come to the city. That's what's, formulates your budget. And then it has to be doled out to all the departments that underneath it that support the city. So talk a little bit about sort of your role now as a city manager and what keeps you up at night as a city manager.
Yeah, it's kind of that propeller conversation, right? Where you're in the middle, and then how do you have this discussion with everyone on each kind of spoke of the propeller? And, it really starts with your city council as a city manager. It starts with the city council, and then it carries down, to the residents and to your people. And so really with the city council, how I approached, them 3 years ago was, okay, $64 million budget. And so part of that budget, the major part of revenues are brought in on property taxes, right? Property taxes for most cities are the number one revenue supporter for cities. And then behind it is sales tax revenue, right? So you got sales tax revenue, then property tax, sales tax revenue, you have your fees, you have cost recovery models, and then you have additional taxes. You could have a sales tax measure, you could have a property tax measure, right? Not everyone's created equal, right? And so a lot of times what we have done as cities, and I think it's been a mistake as a taxpayer, right? We're all taxpayers. We're all residents. Our cities have you got to a certain point, and really the unfunded liabilities caused this problem for us. So retiree health and retirement unfunded liabilities just took off, right? They took off and they were uncontrollable. And what happened is, to manage those in the bad times, we froze positions that never came back. And so number one, as a city manager, when you're talking to your council, you're saying, okay, let's understand our revenue streams. Most of us have, really 3 core buckets: sales tax, property tax, and fees. And then you have additional taxes that really is where we started to do the shotgun approach. What are we trying to solve? Well, oh my God, our paving index is lowest in the state. We need to pave our roads. Well, let's do a property tax. We do a property tax, and now we're paving the roads. And that works for 5 years, but then there's not enough money in the property tax. So then you have to do another property tax or a sales tax measure. What are we trying to solve now? Well, we have infrastructure needs, or we can't balance our budget. We're doing it to balance our budget because the unfunded liabilities have reached a state that we don't have enough revenue to expenditure. We don't have enough revenues to cover our expenditures. And so you're taxing just to balance your budget. Well, you're at a total disadvantage. You don't have a chance for that. So what a lot of cities are doing, and it's smart, you're developing 10-year strategies. So the number one is you start with services. Our number one priority: what are we supposed to be doing as a city? What are we legally responsible for? It's public safety. It's our streets and roads, and it's governance. Okay. Well, what does that look like? That's public. It's public works. It's police and fire. Okay. Well, what does that look like? What's the model? How much does that cost? That goes in the buckets, right, of expenditures. What else do we want to do? Well, a lot of us, it's quality of life. We want to provide quality of life. Library, parks and rec, other nice quality of life issues. And so then it's like, okay, are any of those cost recovery? Well, libraries are free unless we tax it. Same thing on public works. So you develop with the community. You're like, look, we want to provide these quality of life services. Here's how much money we have to handle it from our general fund. And here's additional monies that we need in a library tax or a cost recovery model of fees to provide the services that you want. And so you have this discussion with your community. And when you identify it, that goes into the bucket. Now what's left? It's the strategy long term. And for us, they started years before me. We have to have a funding stream to pay down the unfunded liabilities in retiree health and CalPERS cost. 2034 for all cities, CalPERS hits the peak of that unfunded liability, and then it starts to go down, and it starts to add additional resources for us to attack other things. And so all of our models now project to that peak. How can we get to the peak without cutting any of these services in good times and bad, right? And you develop that model. And then what you do is you have an infrastructure discussion, because now these are the additional taxes. Hey, we have $100 million in needs. We have to repair 5 facilities. We have, all the things we talk about risk. You take the Bay City's CARMA models of, hey, here's where you're getting sued. Here are your claims, landslides, tree falls, sidewalks, all the infrastructure stuff. Well, council, here's our risk. Here's the information provided by the risk pools. Here's how we compare to others. Hey, what is that? Well, that number for Mill Valley, you guys, is $10 million annually for the next 10 years to get to a peak of where now I'm in maintenance mode, not improvements, just maintenance mode. Okay, well, community, here's how much money I have. I have $6 million. I'm short 4 annually, right? I'm short 4. So then I take the discussion to the community now and go, I need to do a sales tax measure, and here's what I want it to go towards. It's that $4 million delta, $40 million over 10 years for infrastructure, right? Everyone understands the services, the pots of money, how revenues, how the expenditures, what everything's going to. And the community understands it. It's trust. It's that trust model of going, hey, you open the picture of how we are set up as a city, how the revenues work. the services you're providing, the cost recovery models you're sharing with us now. You have money for infrastructure, but you're short $4 million annually. And you also, thank you, Mill Valley and other cities, you have a plan to pay down your unfunded liabilities. You can show us what that is, right? Without affecting services and taxing us more. They approved that sales tax measure by 78%, right? And so now we in Mill Valley have a 10-year, $10 million annual with CPI increases to attack a $100 million problem over the next 10 years to improve our risk based on information we have from our cohorts and you within the risk pools. And then on the other side, it's the conversation with the labor groups of like, here's the pots of money, here's how we're, right? They can see it. And I'm like, here's what through actuaries, what we should be paying in claims, in workers' comp claims and liability claims. Here's the opportunities for us. Here's where all the pots are. And so they don't have to go and bring in a third party to like follow the money. They understand it, and I control it now. I don't have to ask approval of a city manager. I control the conversation, right, with my team. And everyone, the residents understand what we're trying to do. The council is set up to make a policy decision because they understand what we're obligated to provide as a government, the extras, the nice to haves, the quality of life services, and what those cost recovery models are. And they understand the limited taxes. We're one of the lowest tax communities in the state. And it's for a reason. We have a lot of resources, but when we do tax, it's part of the puzzle. Right? There's something we're trying to do, and we've been successful in doing that and following through. It's that trust, and it's the culture at all levels. Like everything we do, you form a subcommittee, right? So if you start with your frontline supervisors and labor group. Hey, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And you're all seeking to understand and educating yourselves. And then you're getting out of the way and you're letting people problem solve and give you the solutions. And then you go execute it as the leader. Same thing with taxes. Hey, everyone, here's how we're set up. On a property tax, we only get 8% of it. We only get 1% of sales tax. Here's where it all goes to. We don't get this secret, huge pot of money. It's limited. Here's our resources. Here's what we're obligated to provide. Here's what is nice to have, and we think we're hearing from you that you want to have provided to you as a service as a resident. And then here's what I lose sleep over at night. That $10 million in risk annually sitting out there. I know the sidewalks, the trees, all the things that I am not getting to because I don't have the ability to do it. And so once you tell that story and you're moving together as a community, it's a really special place. And so it took us 3 years to get there, as an example, but now we're moving together. And so we have subcommittees, like we have an infrastructure subcommittee of 7 residents, council members, and staff, and they give their recommendations. They see all the data and the risk, and they heard from the experts, and they're like, here's a recommendation, council. It goes straight to them. I don't interfere. I'm like, yeah, here it is. And here's what the recommendation is. Here's what maybe some of the naysayers said, but the conversation is open. It's transparent. It's our culture of trust and just being open. And I think we get in the way as leaders sometimes of thinking we need to solve all the problems, and you can't. You just can't. You have to set the stage to have the right people in the room, to educate, and then to let them problem solve and get out of their way. And I think that's the ego piece that you don't understand till you sit in the seat of a police chief or a city or town manager. No one knows the awesome responsibility you have, whether you have 30 employees or 2,000. It is unbelievable. You are on an island. You are by yourself. You have your cohorts that know what you go through, but none of us, people are afraid to admit they don't know what they don't know, right? And like all of us, an officer doesn't want to raise their hand in briefing and go, oh God, I got a question. It might be I'm not going to ask it. We're all the same. We're built, even as managers, we're there. So this is one of no, we don't have all the answers. It's okay. We don't need to, but we have an awesome responsibility to set up the team and set the stage for decision making. So just because I gave you an example of Mill Valley, we all are in a different situation. Mill Valley is in the top 1% of opportunity for a city in the state of California. Probably in the nation, right? And that's where I wanted to go purposely. Hey, if I have the right plan and the city has the right resources, oh my God, what could we accomplish? together as my final moment of just, for me, of just my journey in this business. Like, right? I don't want to get burned out. I don't want to get forced out. I want to leave on my own, on my own will, on my terms of developing the last team of like, can I do this? And honestly, I'm in it 3 years. I don't ultimately know if I'm going to be successful, but God darn it, I'm going to try my damnedest. And I've developed a good team. And I'm excited. And so I hope, and I'm excited when I see my cohorts do it. It's always picking up the phone and someone doesn't even know me down south. And I'm like, hey, Todd Cusimano, Mill Valley, I know what you're going through. I'm here for you. Let me tell you my story. Or, hey, great job on that. That was awesome. How did you do that? I want to learn from you, and just learning and supporting each other. That's what this is all about. We're all 80%. It's the 80%. We're where we are because of who we are. So have confidence in your ability. It's that 20% to learn, like what we're talking about now. Hey, how did you get there? What are you doing? How is your budget set up? How are you, the education, all those things. It's that 20% of just, being transparent, telling a story. And honestly, for me, it's hard because I'm a visual person. That's how I learn. And so when you ask me, I talk in circles. I'm not succinct, as you know, but it's a visual. And so I would show behind me, it's the whiteboard, and I'm showing people charts. And I'm like, let me tell you this story about sales tax or property tax or services, right? And you're showing them and you're just telling your story. And I think people really appreciate it. And it's always an aha moment. It goes back to just the first question of like, what do people misunderstand about officers? We're human, right? Bring that human element. There you go.
I'm going to ask you one final question tied to that. And it may be too granular for you, but what's happened over the course of the last 3 to 5 years in California is that the cost of coverages for third-party liability coverage, workers' comp, property coverage, all those types of things have gone up 300 to 500% for every public entity in California. And this chart shows what just the third-party liabilities have tripled in the last 3 years. But when that happens, that forces you, it's the same pot of money that it all comes from. So you're forced to make decisions. Maybe you can answer this, maybe you already kind of have, but when you have to pay 3 to 5 times more for your liability protection, what do you not pay for? What goes away? Is it basically just the streets and roads and trees, or what? Is there anything? What else goes away?
Yeah. So a few buckets get hit. It's usually starts first with, in our cities, it's the quality of life. Quality of life. Your libraries and parks and recreation. It's the first, right? Because it's not a mandate, right? You're not mandated as a city to provide it. And so those are usually some of the first hits to a budget and into the services of a resident, which is very disappointing. The next level, as you get there, it turns into deferred maintenance because it's infrastructure. Like, okay, if I have X amount of dollars for infrastructure, whatever that delta is on those costs, because our premiums go up, right? We have to pay it. We're self-insured. So we have a piece of that pie that we're going to have to pay. What is that? Well, that's then going to go into infrastructure. And so instead of, 2 million, you now have 1 million. Maybe you don't have anything. And then it's just like anything else, your house, as you start to have deferred maintenance, it gets more and more expensive. It never gets cheaper and you never catch up. The only way to solve that deferred maintenance is additional taxes, right? And so that's a loss. The next thing to go, heaven forbid, as you're talking about this, we're getting another hit of, I just told you, the unfunded liability risk between now and 2034 is going up at a same clip right now. And so you're getting hit there. And then you're getting hit in services. And so it's people. You're going to freeze positions. And then we know what happens there. Your services go down, and it just starts to get worse, and where it compounds to a level where there's a fine line of where it hits morale. And when it hits morale, like I talked about as a police chief talking to the managers, you don't improve the risk. You actually make this whole issue worse because you have less trained people. You have people leaving the industry. Your frontline supervisors aren't doing their jobs. They're overworked. They're overwhelmed, and your risks are going to go up. Morale's going to drop, and we're just making this whole system worse. So if anything else, as a leader, and telling that story right now in good times, especially to my counsel, of like, understand that chart. And I have it and I've showed it to them. I'm like, that chart, the unfunded liability chart, all these things, we cannot cut our services of staff. We have to protect our greatest resource, our people. If anything else, we have to protect it. If you don't, it's going to make it worse and we'll never recover as an organization. And so that's my number one lesson and point to city managers. You got to know where that line is, and you have to tell that story in the good times. Because when when the shit hits the fan, what are we doing? Like, it's too late. It's just like, how do you build public trust? Well, you better have been doing it 5 years ago, so that's it. That's our issue. And I think you have city managers that are just overwhelmed. You have city managers that aren't in these meetings. They don't see those charts, Rob. And so they're focused on unfunded liabilities. How am I going to make the payroll, and how am I going to do this, let alone that chart? And so they need to understand it. And then we need to, as a group, figure out ways to fix it. And so for us, our workers' comp levels are lower, but our focus is, where can we save in those risks to actually follow the charts? And it's just like we did with unfunded liabilities. Hey, if we do better than that actuary, let's not put it back over here. Let's put it into a reserve fund to help us offset some of these increases. At the same time, let's do our part and tell our story of our successes, of how we lowered infrastructure risks, workers' comp liability, and just in general, police claims, right? Let's do our part. This is a long-term kind of, and so that's our piece of the puzzle, right? Little Mill Valley, but man, we're all in it together. And so that's what we have to do. This is a long-term solution, but we got to get on it now, because it's a crazy clip. And the last piece to that is just the punitive damages, the jury verdicts now. I don't know what the standard in the industry is anymore. It is really, it's been eye-opening being an alternate board member on CARMA. It's been a real learning lesson, even though I've been on Bay City since 2007, just seeing the bigger picture of what you're all working on. It's big, it's scary. And,
yeah, it's so enlightening. Everything you've said, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
So public trust is connected to the people that are sitting on the juries, that are given the awards, that, the ability to do potentially tort reform to reduce some of these high cost verdicts is potentially on the radar this year. Everything is connected. So, but Todd, we just wanted to thank you so much. What a wonderful discussion we've had today. We appreciate it. Again, this is the Good Karma Podcast. You can find us at karmajpa.org, which will be on the screen, and we'll be in a number of different places going forward that we'll also put up there for you. But thank you so much, Todd. On behalf of Rob, just want to tell you how much we appreciated our time with you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the opportunity.
Cool.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Join us on August 4th, where we will be talking to retired sergeant from the Oxnard Police Department and founder of Tombstone Courage, Jeff McGreevy. Be sure to follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube so you stay connected to new conversations. And as always, if this episode adds value, share it with your team.